I think perhaps all Buddhist-inspired traditions have meditation as a key part of a practice. Some lineages more than others. In the Zen tradition, there's typically a lot of time is given to meditation practice. At Yokoji, where I still live, we'll be entering the new training period soon. Another 3 months of concentrated practice, where there's more time for zazen, for sitting practice. It oscillates between more time for sitting or more time for work. Those are your choices. It's like that's how it is at a residential center. But we always, no matter the schedule, give a certain amount of time each day toward sitting practice. And if you never hear talks, dharma talks, anything formal, but just live your life with some time given toward meditation, towards still sitting and present awareness as a daily practice, then you would be certainly well served in that. But for us as human beings, we tend meditation is really, it's very helpful to practice together as a group. For anyone who knows, who's done a retreat or a longer period of time, there's no way you would sit that long each day for days on end unless everybody else was doing that. Maybe a few people. There's a few people in history who are that way, who can do that by themselves, and there are some, like the figure represented in Wood Behind, who didn't rely on a group, but spent long time in solo practice. But to sit together is supportive. But in our business of meditation, questions around the Dharma tend to emerge. For most people who come to a spiritual practice, Buddhism, Zen, or secular practices, there's usually an itch. There's something there that brings people to sitting practice, and something that keep keeps people practicing too. I wanted to bring up today a case from the Zen tradition, a koan case, which often, koans make a useful talking point. Often difficult, these conversations between Zen teachers and other Zen teachers, or Zen teachers and their students, that have come down to us from antiquity. In this case, about something that happened about 1500 years ago, something in that area. But a tradition that's been maintained all of these long years, because it has real value and meaning for human beings. And when we look back to these texts from even a couple of thousand years ago, we see that people were people, right? There were, of course, differences in the way that we live, and differences now in technology, in the way that we live in the world, but not much changed in the human condition. In fact, perhaps you could say that nothing has changed with human beings. That's also something to be something unfortunate, we can say, right? Because we have such capacity for goodness, such capacity for love. But when we look out into the world, we see the world is as broken, as difficult and violent as it has ever been, perhaps. Yeah, no, not much has changed. So we can use these cases from antiquity to help us shine a light on our experience today. So I'm bringing up from this is from the Blue Cliff Record, perhaps the most famous of Zen koan collections, uh, and it features a Zen teacher, a Zen master, perhaps, right? And I use that term sparingly. Right? Sometimes you hear that term, but Zen master, that's quite some title, right? But I think in this case, this is Joshu, a Zen teacher Joshu, and he was regarded as perhaps the greatest of the Zen teachers and the greatest teacher next to the Buddha. So it's kind of just certainly in a very highly respected Zen teacher. And it said one of his particular gifts was to be able to communicate with words and subtlety of words, very skillfully with words. That's quite a skill, right? Because as human beings, this is the main way that we communicate. We communicate with words to one another, and yet words are so imprecise often, downright misleading at other times. Right? There's a lot of suffering comes from the use of words. Right? They're a tool that can be used well, and a tool that can be used inexpertly too. So to be able to say something about the Dharma is very difficult. If in fact it's best not to, right? Like just cut the mic, right? Because the best teaching is the teaching of stillness and silence, which we already began with. That's the direct experience, the direct teaching of reality. And trying to say something about that is much more difficult. The Buddha would remind his followers, the practitioners of the day, that all of the talks, all of the words were a finger pointing at the moon. Right, moon here being the uh, reality, real experience, and words being a finger that points toward that. So words should always remember that words are pointers. A Dharma talk should be that. It should be a pointer, something that's somebody is perhaps clumsily trying to express, which strikes an innate truth in you that you already understand. Right? But often for us as Dharma practitioners, it's, I understand, but somehow it feels a little out of reach, almost like something that's been forgotten. And that's part of the human condition too. That as we live our life, as we gather conditioning and experiences, some of our innate freedom of mind, our innate peace of mind is lost as we gather all of the weight of the world and all of the complications and the busyness and the responsibilities. So here we have a monk who comes to Zen teacher Joshu and said, um, "All things return to one. Where does the one return to?" A real classic Zen phrase, right? All things return to the one. Where does the one return? Yes, Joshu. So before Joshu's answer, maybe we just kind of reflect on that question. All of us here, we have Zoom or in the room, and everyone that's outside the room and not on Zoom, everybody has appeared in the world. Where did you spring from? You could say where you came from today. You kind of left the house and maybe you drove over here, maybe you walked over here, right? It's like, where did you come from? But if you go back, then you can go back a little further and say, where do you come from? I always like to do that in the United States, coming from the UK, where I was from originally. You come to the United States and people are from everywhere, right? Like I lived in Hollywood for a number of years, and one thing I really appreciated living there was people from like countries that I'm like, wow, I didn't know that was a country, and I like there'd be people from all over the world. And and everywhere that you go, like here, like Long Beach is very much that way. There's people from all over, from the world and the United States being so large. Sometimes the question, "Where you from?" It's like, "Well, I'm in Ohio originally, or Wisconsin, or just people from all over. Where did you come from?" But if we peel back further from that, and you might say, "Well, my family came from Eastern Europe originally," or so wherever, some point on the globe where people arrived to the United States. Okay, well, if we go back further than that, no, really, where did you come from? Right, where we strip away the history, the identity and the label, and look really back to the beginning of this one here. Where did you come from? And that's everything in this world has that beginning in mystery and appearing now in mystery. Who are you? Where did you come from? These questions are still very, very pertinent. All things return to the one. Where does the one return? And all things return to the one. The motivation for the Buddha's practice to look into the marks of existence, old age, sickness, ultimately death for everyone. Yeah? The Buddha in his privileged birth of the day, was from the early beginnings, not satisfied to just settle into a life of material gain, or a life of comfort, because it struck him very deeply that way. But ultimately, there's no safety to be had in this life. Ultimately, we come in with nothing, we go out with nothing. Like, what is that? There's a quote I like by Mark Twain. There's so many wonderful quotes. Mark Twain, he's up there with Oscar Wilde and Yogi Berra, like what wonderful quotes. And so when he was near the end of his life, someone said, are you afraid to die? And Mark Twain apparently said, not at all. I was dead for millions of years and it didn't cause me even the slightest inconvenience. It's like a wonderful statement from Mark Twain. All things return to the one. Where does the one return to? And of course, this question is driven as consumed human beings since human beings began. What does it mean? Where do we go? This question though is rooted really in Taoism. There's in the Zen tradition, when you look back particularly to its early beginnings in China, in the Chan tradition in China, when Buddhism comes into China over the course of a couple of centuries, there is at least as much Taoism at play in Zen as there is Buddhism. It's quite a heady cocktail. It's sort of mixing those two things together and producing something that would become Zen. So this is quite a Taoist statement. All things return to the one. Where does the one return to? Yeah. So when we arrive here, we come in and we meet one another, and then we settle down and take the seat, and there's a preamble and some announcements, and then we settle down, and then the bell is struck, and then suddenly there's no more speaking, no more movement. There's the experience of this world and this life in its totality. And when we practice meditation, we practice healing the divide or sealing the gap. Right? That gap of that divide, that as human beings with a dualistic questing consciousness of it's always creating subject and object, difference. Yeah. That's how we navigate this curious reality in that way. But that is also the root of Buddha called dukkha, suffering, right? The sense of separation and difference. And again, we look out into the world, and writ large is the sum total of the cause and effect of separation and difference between people. When we sit down, then we allow difference to be extinguished, a temporary difference. Yeah, in our mind, in a very practical way, can find that to be quite difficult and subtle. There is undoubtedly the sense of me, I sitting here, experienced in a world that seems to be, you're over there, I'm over here. That seems quite clear, right? But then when we sit and if you can really allow, look, stop. So much of meditation and sitting is that, to stop. Because we like to keep running. Even when we sit, we're still running, right? Running the agenda, running the narrative, running the commentary. Right? Do you have that narrator that doesn't stop in your mind? Yeah. My mind's like that, thinking all of the time. Wondered once, it's just like, you know, I heard an ad, and it was another ad like Morgan Freeman. It's just like there's such an extraordinary voice. I booked in for everything. He just has that. Did March of the Penguins? Remember that back in the day? He just has a great voice, and I'm like, wow, that must be so seductive for him. If he has to listen to Morgan Freeman and his whole head. How do you turn that off? That must be. Right? So sometimes, like, we can be like seduced by our own voice in our mind. That's always sort of comparing, thinking about things, contrasting things. But meditation, as Zen sitting, asks us, from the beginning to just set that aside and let go of the identity of the impulse to continue to add and shape and control that aspect. It's why it's so essential in sitting to really activate oneself in the senses, to like look, see the room, see the people here, listen to the sound. Maybe we have some idiot sneezes really loud, or we hear or you hear us or siren on the street. We can take in our mind all of these things as impositions or spoiling our quiet sitting. But the sounds of the world are all enlivening. We can allow it all, right? It's nice to sit still and quiet. But then once we're established in our sitting, really invite the world in. And inviting the world in is inviting the internal and what is perceived as the external experience, allowing it all without preference. So that there's nothing to do in one sitting then, but just be awake, be alive. All things then return to the one, return to oneness, return to the non-divided or non-differentiated. Because usually in our experience, internal, external, we're applying this differentiation. Some things are welcome, some are not. Some things are good, some things are bad. Some things are troubling, some things are pleasing. It's that differentiation that we bring in that causes a disturbance where there is no original disturbance. We can sit and allow all things to return to the one. Be undivided in our attention, our presence. It requires effort, but the effort is to stay out of our own way and allow the world to be thus. Beautifully simple and as ardently difficult as that. So then where does this one return to? Yeah, in Taoism, we'd say the way, the Tao. This is it. This is all of everything ever now. It's always this. Nowhere to go to, nowhere to come from. The universe, the whole world is always complete, always has been. It's our own struggle with how do we come and go in that. It feels like we're in the world. But that's a shift with Dharma practice. You realize you're not in the world. The world is expressing you, like it or not. The world is living you, unfolding you. But that's a wonderful thing, and it lessens sort of takes the load off. To be like, I don't remember auditioning for this part to arrive in the world. I don't remember signing anything. Right? But here we are. Here we are. So this could be a question from a monk here. All things return to the one. Where does the one return to? Someone with some experience in this matter. Someone who has tasted or had some realization of what we might call oneness, right? Which is something of a provisional word. You know, we talk about maybe duality and non-duality, or difference and oneness. The oneness ultimately is also a dualistic concept. It's kind of a concept. It can be a useful concept, but concepts don't reach or match direct experience. Direct experience of oneness contains all of the difference, contains all of this. It's happening all of the time. So perhaps this, but he has some realization, the monk, of this. All things return to the one. I have some understanding there. But what does it mean? Where does the one return to? He asks Joshi. And the answer may surprise you, but Josu says. Um, he said, when I was in the province of Sei, I made a hempen shirt and it weighed 7 pounds. So I'm confident that you weren't expecting that answer. You like, I know what he's going to say. He made a heavy shirt. Right? Why would he answer now? See, this is an inexplicable wild Zen for you, right? It's like, this is what gives it the character or the flavor of Zen. When asked this like fundamental question around existence, he says, I was once in the province of Sei. I made a hempen shirt. It weighed 7 pounds. Why would he answer in such feels like such a strange way, you know? I like that it's a hempen, like they really specify it was a hempen shirt. I don't, it's pretty heavy, but like hemp's pretty heavy. I don't know if maybe it had some properties, like it got wet and there was like some, I don't know, little CBD action going on with it or something. Your shirt kind of soothed the muscles. I don't know, but a hempen shirt that weighs 7 pounds. Like imagine that, like what would that be? Like a 7 pound shirt, right? That's not doesn't sound useful, right? But let's look at it from a different direction. I mean, in one sense, yeah, it's where does the one come from and where does the one return to? I left the house late this morning and drove to Long Beach. When we're done here, I intend to return. And I, I feel optimistic and quite hopeful that I'll be able to do that. But in this world, you never know. There's always tail risk in the world. There's always a risk in the world, right? You never know. You can never take that returning granted to go from A to B, to go somewhere. But wherever you go or not go, you'll be here. You'll be right here. Joshua's saying, back in the day, I was in Sei province. We can imagine this as a province of China, called perhaps another, a ways away from where he is when he's making this statement. He made something. He made a shirt. He made his clothes. They weighed a lot. But here he's a mature teacher at this time, quite elderly, and helping to guide the community, to guide students. It's a looking back at his life of spiritual practice, a long life of practice and meditation and studying the Dharma. He made something. He made clothes. They weighed a lot. What could that be? If you look at our own life, you look at what is your, how do we define ourselves? How much do we define ourselves by our experiences, our relationships? Whether we're a parent or a child or a sibling, whether we're a boss or with the intern. In our life, we gather this identity of who we are. And even in the spiritual tradition, for somebody who practices as a Zen monk, as a Zen practitioner, through the practice of spirituality, through the practice of meditation, it's easy to make an identity out of that. This is like, the person who I am. And these are the things that I have realized, or these are my accomplishments. But anything that we wear in terms of that exterior identity of a way that we show ourselves to the world, you know, really covers up something that's also at the core. Right? If we're such a person that if we become, it's quite easy that we can become fixed, the kind of person that we are, and then compare ourselves to the kind of people they are, right? And then suddenly, or very quickly, we're right back in that division. We're right back in that separation. Joshi says he made a very heavy shirt some years ago. But at this point in his life, at this point in his practice, he's not wearing clothes. Maybe a simple robe, to be literal. But in terms of identity, in terms of what he claims to understand or not understand. And he's considered, a Zen teacher, as an expert. I heard an interesting definition of expert the other day. It's someone who knows one more thing than you, right? Which is interesting. Somebody can appear to be an expert, but what do they really know? It's like, how much do sometimes we'll hold people up to be a certain way. Like we do that very much in Dharma practice. We can project ideas onto our teachers or people who have become, earned the kind of the titles, and just think, wow, for them, it must be a certain way. They must experience the world in a different way. Rather than being an expert that knows one more thing than you, a Dharma teacher knows one less thing than you, perhaps, right? Our practice is a practice of cultivating loss rather than gain. Dharma practice is not about, creating it's not a small s self-improvement project, but it is a large capital S self-improvement project. Right? It's not about improving particularly this one here, although there are real benefits that come from an authentic practice like this. It will help and support us in our lives. But what is it for? What is our life for? Is it for us? I say cultivating loss when we come into sitting, into meditation. Again, we're not gathering new information. We're experiencing the world as it is, which is always fresh and new, but it's not about making something out of that, becoming somebody more enlightened, somebody who has deeper insight. But rather it runs in reverse, where we are becoming ever more who we already were from the beginning, the person we've always have been all along. But through practice, a set a rediscovery of that one, returning to who we've always been, and being able to embrace that one and embrace the world as it is, undivided and one. Nothing beats that. In Dharma practice, it's being at home in oneself, being at home in the world. That's worth something. Because to live, if we live the world tests us and tries to and divides us along so many different lines all of the time. I look about in my own heart, my own mind, after practicing all of these long years, and I'll mutter in my mind about how much I dislike a certain person. Just like, that guy, you know? Still, because that's the human condition. That's always occurring. But through practice, through meditation, through presence, through what we do, right? It's like, does that darker aspect of our human nature, is that the voice that's running us? That's the difference. That voice doesn't stop. But is that the one that's in charge that runs us? Or can we reclaim and return to the center of the experience where we can we feel and experience our own human nature, but that human nature is being experienced in this broad, vast, what we call Buddha nature or original nature, where you can watch your own thoughts, your own narrative, your own story, smile at its foibles, and make a decision on how to act that is based on what benefits the world, what benefits this world, what is the right thing to do, which is often found in what is the natural, appropriate, and intuitive response to the world. Right? Returning to our truly like our half-centered experience of the world, which also includes a head. But in our world and our society, there's so much uh rests on what's cooked up between the ears. That's what's held up as being the most important thing. But as a dharma practitioner, harmonizing the heart and the head, harmonizing our present experience, which includes what we think about it and what we're planning to do. Okay, becoming ever more present, becoming more mindful and aware, we live in better alignment with the world as it is. But that's not an easy thing. Seeing the world as it is quite sobering. Is it not, right? We could tell ourselves stories about that and blame other people for it. But ultimately, it's our responsibility, each one of us, to do what we can to alleviate suffering where we find it in our own life and the life of those around us, which is our life. As simple and as profound as that, the core message of every great spiritual tradition since people arose.
Hi, I'm Robert Lurie with Long Beach Meditation. Your gracious generosity makes this programming possible. If you found this video to be of value, please consider making a donation here. And if you'd like to watch more videos like this one, click here. And if you want to stay up to date with Long Beach Meditation, click here to subscribe. Thank you.